Welcome to Tech Society, a podcast about all facets of technology and our society. Twice a week, we deliver in-depth analysis from a technological perspective, giving you our take on things and interviewing people that are doing important things. Now, here's your hosts, Alex Dunmo and John Nguyen.
And before we begin this episode, if you think tech can solve a problem for you, go and check out njs.dev. Ninja Software has Perth's top locally and homegrown software engineering and design talent, focusing on bespoke software for your vision.
Welcome to another episode of Tech Society. Today we're interviewing Glenn Butcher. Glenn Butcher is a very successful technology company builder with previous experience in senior management roles at Amazon, Atlassian, and a plethora of technology startups. He has 25 years across the board experience in technology and diverse industries, from world-class medical research to ISPs, with a deep understanding of building customer-centric organizations and focusing on delivering outstanding service to those companies' customers. He was the leader of Atlassian's SaaS engineering team, and he grew their online product from 1,500 to over 10,000 customers and led $100 million projects at Amazon in the field of data analytics, simulation, and optimization. In today's episode, we learn a lot of amazing things in the world of VC and SaaS startups. We also learn, 1, what makes American culture different and why Australians find it confusing in Silicon Valley. 2, what's the amazing startups that Glenn's working with here in Perth. 3, things to look out for in your startup exit strategy. All right, let's jump into it.
Hi, I'm Glenn Butcher. I'm from Perth. That's where I'm from. I've spent a career in the tech field at places like the Telethon Kids Institute, Atlassian, Amazon, various successful and unsuccessful startups, and finally landed back here in my hometown of Perth. Very much enjoying being here.
How long have you been back in Perth?
About 6 weeks.
6 weeks? Wow. That's not long.
No, not at all. Including 2 weeks of quarantine and a week of lockdown. So.
So is this a permanent shift or?
Yes, this is a permanent shift home. I'm going to be here for the rest of my life along with my wife and kids. We're all from here, or at least my wife and I are from here. So this is home for us again. So forever.
It makes you think that Perth is the place to settle down. It's one of those things I've heard.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and is that the reason to come back to Perth, is to kind of let your kids grow up here?
That's it, exactly. Our kids are fairly young, and we wanted our kids to grow up in a great place. And frankly, I haven't seen a better place than Perth, to grow up in. So
I agree. Although they won't realise that until they're like 28.
Yeah.
They'll leave and they'll go somewhere else, and then they'll come back.
Yeah.
That's quite consistent, actually. As you grow,
that's what I did.
Yeah, into your mid-30s, I've realised that Perth is great. And it just happens to coincide with the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I left about 28, actually.
You left at 28?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think how old I was, but maybe 32, there we go.
Yeah. All right, well, let's just jump into
there's a long
first. Yeah,
there's a long history there.
We're obviously really interested in Atlassian. They're a software company we hold
great respect for Atlassian.
I love Atlassian. We've kind of based a lot of our business model and it's what we're trying to transition to in what Atlassian did. Yeah. So what number employee were you at Atlassian?
120.
120. Which
did not feel early then, but really feels early now. There's like 5,000 or 6,000 people there. So
yeah. And what was it like? Where were you in your career when you started working for Atlassian?
I was still pretty new in the kind of management stage of my career, and I really recently graduated from being a individual contributor or kind of senior technical person into something where I actually was more of a people leader. So for me, I was still very much trying to learn how to be a decent people leader at that time. I've come a long way since then. I think it's one of those things you keep getting better at over time.
And I think you were working at Internode before.
Yes, Internode, the ISP,
yes.
Which was a deeply technical place, but and I learned a lot kind of working there in Adelaide as well.
As a young man, I loved playing all the Counter-Strike servers on Internode.
You're welcome. One of my teams built those.
It was one of those few, I think back then, getting good ping, low latency gaming was actually quite hard. It was either over east or half of us were still on dial-up, and Internode was always great to play on.
So we ran the best game servers because we cared the most.
Yeah, it was obvious actually, and the websites were clearly made by gamers. I remember back then.
I'm not sure it's a good thing or a bad thing.
I was going to say, is that a compliment?
Just the style, it talked to me as a young man.
My team built the website too, so.
There you go.
So can you tell us about the start of your career? When you got out of high school, university, what was your original trajectory? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a scientist.
Okay.
Cool. So I went to university to do a science degree in microbiology, and I didn't graduate because I got really ill. So I needed to go off and do something else. And when I recovered and realised I was incredibly broke, my girlfriend was financially supporting me. I needed to get a job, and I got a job at the Telethon Kids Institute actually, because I apparently knew something about computers, which I did a little bit, and they rapidly learned a lot more quickly enough I didn't get fired.
So you fake it till you make it.
Pretty well, exactly right.
What were you doing there?
I was in the IT team actually. So initially started right at the bottom, delivering mice and keyboards, helping set up people's laptops.
The guy underneath the desks.
Yeah, the guy underneath the desk plugging in cables. Like that's absolutely where I started. So right at the bottom there, and I just learnt rapidly, all self-taught, and end up basically building a lot of the kind of computer systems there and the networking there and a whole bunch of things. So
self-taught. That's an interesting one. Let's jump on that.
Yeah. So I'm self-taught. I entered the IT industry when I was 17, and I actually at university I started to be a lawyer, which I gave up on to actually be in the I want to say technology industry rather than IT industry. And we generally, we love employing self-taught people. So we find they're more driven and more creative than, I wouldn't say than. I'd say you can be really good and be university educated as well. We don't see it as a prerequisite.
Yeah, I think it's not really a prerequisite. I mean, I can't really put it as a prerequisite given my own background. But also I think, back in that era, this is back in the 90s, things are a bit different then, and, there wasn't the kind of level or capability in the courses, these days. So
yeah, that's very true.
I see there's a lot of benefit for a university education in that space.
Absolutely,
but yeah, self-taught people are the best.
Yeah, agree. How did you get from there? Where did you go after there, actually?
Internode, actually.
Internode.
So I was at Telethon Kids for 9 years and 3 months.
Wow.
Just short of my 10-year long service leave. Not that I'm counting that or anything. So I basically decided it was probably time, if I was ever going to leave Perth in my life. I spoke to my then girlfriend and said, we got to leave sometime. Let's leave before we get too old. So we jumped ship, and we were talking about moving to maybe Berlin or Vancouver or someplace extremely cool and far away, and we moved to Adelaide.
Far cry.
Why?
I pigeonholed Simon Hackett at a conference, the SAGE AU conference, the System Administrators Guild conference, in Perth actually, and I politely badgered him enough until he put me forward for a job. And I managed to get in.
And so, what was it like going from Telethon Institute to Internode, which is I guess a more private company?
Yes, a more private company. So probably the biggest change actually was not the fact that one was research orientated or one was children orientated or one was for academics or scientists. The biggest change was actually that at the Telethon Kids Institute I was in a support role. My role was definitely there to support the scientists. Whereas at Internode, my team, the things that I did were kind of at the forefront of what we're trying to achieve. We're considered to be at one of the teams at the front there, kind of leading.
It's like being innovative and actually creating new products. And
yes, exactly right. So we were kind of more in that space. So we were, people that build things that made money and things like that, along with a few other teams. And that was a really big cultural change there, from being I guess you could say, cost center to one that's actually a product builder. And that was kind of more my introduction into that kind of world. Something I actually discovered in Perth, or perhaps more accurately didn't discover in Perth, was that kind of role, like the ability to build your own products versus just buying something from somebody else.
And actually, that's a really good point, because especially back in those days, Perth was not really kind of innovative in that sense. Although we did have IronNet. So
Yeah, that's INET started about that time, kind of a bit before then. No, that's when I describe myself as being in the IT team, whereas I describe other teams as being in like the engineering team.
Yeah,
right.
That's why before I said the technology industry and not the IT industry.
I mean, information technology.
Technology. IT is under technology. The technology is...
Yes, IT is a support function typically.
Yes.
That's what really what the word has come to mean.
Yeah.
Whereas like product engineering or software engineering is kind of different. So.
Tell us about your the end of your Internode career and then moving to Atlassian. Why did you make that move, and how did that go down?
So I had a really broad set of responsibilities at Internode. So I ran the Internode gaming team, built the website, I ran the system administration team, ran the internal IT team, did cybersecurity, and those were all simultaneously. And I was the frontline manager for 20. Well, I did performance reviews for 26 people. So
how can you know how 26 people are doing?
So, do you work for me?
Who are you?
Who are you? And look, it wasn't terribly effective, to be honest. Right, I was just spread way too thin. So I wanted to move to a role where I was not quite so burdened, and moved to something a bit smaller. So when I moved to Atlassian, I think I had a team when I started there of 2.5. And the half was like a university student that came in on the afternoons sometimes. So yes, it was quite a change there of focus, and it was actually back in the IT team, ironically enough. Like I literally did do desktop support. That's what my team did.
Tell us about what's happened since leaving Atlassian.
Well, I had a bit of a portfolio career after then, actually. So went through a couple of startups, some of which were successful, some of which were catastrophic failures. Which I think probably learned more from the catastrophic failures.
I was about to say, lessons learned.
Oh yeah, lessons learned on that one.
Yeah. Were any of them founded by, did you found any startups?
No, I didn't. So I joined a few, but I didn't found any.
Any big victories out of those startups?
Not really, unfortunately. So, some of them did okay, but certainly in my immediate post-Atlassian career, kind of they didn't. And then I basically got a job offer from Amazon that was too good to turn down. So I went, all right, I'm going to go do that for a while. So actually, initially, they were talking to me about a role in the network operations organization, because Amazon was building a network operations organization in Australia. Yeah. But they had a look at me and saw that I had a bit more of a software background. So they offered me a role as a software manager without a team, or in fact without even clear ideas what I was actually going to be building. So
what did you manage in the end?
So I ended up managing like teams in Sydney and Dublin and Seattle, doing like internet monitoring, network telemetry, which was a really big scale project, and a bunch of kind of different type of simulation products. Some of which worked and some of which didn't, because we're trying different things, and some of them just didn't pan out. Again, I probably learnt more from the failures than from the successes.
What was the cultural difference between Atlassian and Amazon?
I'll talk about the cultural similarities first. Both were very high-performing organisations, so there was a lot expected from you, kind of in any kind of role, and so there was that constant feeling that your colleagues were amazing people and you got to keep up, right? And that was an internal feeling. Like it's not like anybody created that or set that. It's just the nature of the people that you work with were so amazing that you always kind of wondered how you managed to get hired.
It's common imposter syndrome that you see.
Oh, absolutely, yes. But there was also some differences, and I think part of that was the Australian culture versus the American culture. So Amazon's an American company, and Atlassian came out of Australia. It's got lots of people in America these days. But yes, there's a really distinct cultural difference there between communication styles, like how things communicated, how praise is done. There's lots of differences like that, and a lot of the kind of more, I wouldn't say necessarily laid back, but more perhaps cheeky parts of Atlassian kind of were very Australian in culture. And I wouldn't see an American company doing that. So
when you say things like praise are different, with the American culture, would you mind expanding on that? I'm really curious. Like, how would a American executive give you praise over, say, a standard Australian?
Well, America might expect to be praised for coming in that day.
Oh,
so
really?
So thanks for coming in today. There's an element there of praise that's kind of expected as part of that.
Wow.
So that was actually an early Atlassian thing where there was shirts made, T-shirts that said "Thanks for coming in today," because the Australians were like, "Why are you thanking me for that? That makes no sense."
I totally get that T-shirt. Yeah,
that's great.
I came in today.
Yeah.
What else do you want?
High standards.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that. I thought the Americans might be a bit more cutthroat and.
Oh, absolutely. There's that too. But
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing, right? There's the praise, but there's also the cutthroat thing, kind of going at the same time, right? So as an Australian, sometimes you kind of have to learn how to navigate that.
And like read between the lines. Was that praise real, or was it just?
Absolutely, yes.
'Cause I'm pretty sure if I actually said to someone, "Thanks for coming in today,"
Being sarcastic.
No, in Australia, you go, you're being sarcastic. Like,
yeah, like you're taking the piss. Like,
yeah.
So how long were you at Amazon for?
3.5 years.
And where did you go after Amazon?
Kind of semi-retired, actually. So,
Nice.
so
Good place to be.
So I basically stopped being an employee of really anyone, and basically joined several boards. Started doing a bit of consulting, mainly for a company called Prospa, the fintech, and kind of joined venture. So eventually became a venture partner at a venture capital firm based in Sydney.
Was there a bit of soul searching at that point where you're just like, what should I do now? What really interests me? And then you discovered that VC and investing and all that kind of stuff was more interesting to you. Was there a point where you discovered that?
I would actually say it was my financial advisor that kind of grabbed me by the lapels and slapped me around the face and said, "Why are you doing this? This does not align with any of the things you've told me are your goals." And I went, "Oh, right, yeah, okay, thank you for the advice. Thank you, you're quite correct." Sometimes I think it takes someone external to you to actually kind of to grab you around the collars and like slap you around the face and go, "What are you doing?" That made me kind of really realise it wasn't what I wanted to be doing with my life. So really, I guess maybe it's my kind of background, but I enjoy helping people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things I've done since then are fundamentally about helping other people be successful, and I actually really get a real kick out of that. So.
Your startup experience between Atlassian and Amazon, has that helped you a lot? Like helping startups now.
Absolutely, and those boards I spoke about, they're all like startup boards. So, so I get pretty intimately involved with a bunch of startups and kind of help them.
What does the average startup that you're on the board look like? Like what size and relative? Are they revenue generating startups, or are they still pre-revenue? Like
a mixture, really. So some are profitable, kind of crazy rare beasts, and some are pre-revenue. Some are tiny, less than 5 people, and others are kind of more in the 30 kind of person range. So,
what does it take to get VC and you on the board as a pre-revenue startup? Because obviously that's a harder sell, right?
Really, it's about excitement, or vision, or like, are you going somewhere?
Yeah.
Like, is it interesting? And I'm pretty busy and I have lots of opportunities, and things that aren't interesting, I'm not interested in getting involved with, right? So it needs to be, something that I feel like has got some energy, momentum, and excitement about it. So it's really what it comes down to.
It must be hard because a lot of startup owners believe in their product. They believe that it is amazing and you should be interested too.
That's the fundamental divide in mindset between a startup founder and an investor. So a startup founder has to believe 110% in the startup.
That's right.
Or else they wouldn't be doing it. The investor always has to kind of go, yes, but I know what the odds are. And the odds are that you probably won't be a success. Yeah. That's right. So there's that.
But it's worth the journey, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely worth the shot. But that's the difference there. The founder is 100% believing in their own startup, whereas the investor is more like, I believe one of these startups will be successful. Hopefully it's yours, but maybe it might be someone else's.
Are there any cool startups that you're on the board that you'd like to talk about now?
Sure. So for the Perth audience, let me talk about 2 that are based in Perth, actually. So one is Ecocentric. They're based down in Fremantle. Been on the board there since January 2020. They're a energy tech company that basically does really innovative stuff to measure power and therefore predict failures for things like air conditioners and HVAC units and pumps and things like that.
Cool.
So they're a cool technology. Got a hardware play to it as well, because it's all about the hardware install, and then goes into the cloud for data processing. So I'm geeking out here because I really love the technology side of it as well.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool.
But actually, it's like a really big problem because there's 15 zillion pumps around the world, in HVAC and kind of water pumps. So big problem space for that. So that's one cool company. And the second one is Student Edge, which I only recently joined the board of in January, actually, as chair. And they're in the online student space, and they're busy building a new set of products, which I'm not ready to announce yet. But let's just say there was a reason I joined them, and kind of watch this space later this year because they're doing some really interesting things.
That's cool.
Cool. So we've made it to WA, which is great. Actually, we started in WA, went all the way over there, came back. So now that you're here, like you've kind of scoped out the startup landscape. You know, what's exciting? What's impressed you so far? And you've already talked about the two so far, no? But just as a general cultural difference to the
ecosystem.
Yeah.
So WA is isolated. Everybody knows that. And just like Darwin's, animals, finches and what have you, isolation breeds differences. And what's interesting is that people in WA don't even know what they're good at.
That's true. That's very true.
So true.
Right? So there are things that I see coming in WA. There's the obvious stuff relating to hydrogen or energy or batteries or, mining tech. They're all everyone kind of goes, oh, of course WA's good at those things, right?
Yeah.
But actually WA has like advantages in things like biotech, based on kind of unique natural kind of life here, and also just a seemingly high proportion of people with biotech skills in WA, disproportionately so. And that's not something that people really realise, but I've seen a bunch of biotech stuff coming out of WA, which is really interesting. So that's kind of an area of competitive advantage. So stuff like that, actually, that I think WA is really well poised to do well at. Another one example is remote management. So Perth, I think, is the largest remote management hub in the world.
It would be, yeah. Manage all the mine sites.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, with COVID and everybody kind of getting used to Zoom calls and what have you, well, just imagine how the thinking is going to change around remote management of things remotely, and how well WA is poised to take advantage of that. That's not something people even realise, because they don't even think about how that WA is good at it.
Not a sexy industry either. Yeah, it's not.
It's not solving the world's problems.
Although during COVID it is.
It kind of is now.
It kind of is, yeah. So no, I'm actually really excited about all the stuff that comes out of WA. We don't have to be the next Silicon Valley. We can be our own thing and could be great at that.
Yeah, that's actually interesting, because I like to say that I foresee Perth becoming like Silicon Valley. That's my dream for Perth. But you're right, it's not Silicon Valley. It's something different, but with the same
Swan Valley
drive and Swan Valley, yeah. But the same drive and engineering. That's exactly that's the core. You need a lot of engineers.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few engineers. We have great universities here, and seen a lot of kind of physical engineering talent, mechanical and things like that, mechatronics, etc. And increasingly like software engineering. Present here as well.
Well, and the crossovers between those, generally someone who's a good mechatronics engineer will be a good software developer. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Same kind of thinking.
Yeah, so I did get a mechatronics degree many years ago, and here I am.
That's cool. That's definitely how we see Perth as well. So what's your message to startups that want to become billion-dollar companies?
Okay, I've got a few points here. So one is, dream big, not small. So don't think of yourself as a WA company. Think of yourself as a global company that happens to reside in WA.
Okay.
So kind of think global first. Second one is be a lifelong learner. So you don't know everything. No one around you does. But all of the really successful people I know who are CEOs of big companies and all that are lifelong learners. They spend a lot of time reading books. They talk to people. They're always educating themselves. Third one, I guess, is every day matters. So execute every day with a great sense of urgency. You have to be in that mindset every single day, that every day matters.
Can you expand on that one?
Yeah, is that the hustle that we hear about?
Is that like because you were in management, would that be the kind of thing where you get in the morning and you make sure everything's on track, and how did you live that?
So for a lot of the time in startup land, well, let me explain it differently. In a non-startup land, you might have a project and you execute, and you come in every day and you try and make sure the project's on track. Right? In startup land, you come in and you work on something you didn't even know you needed to do the previous day.
That's right.
Right.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of that bit. So in other places, you're like, oh, I guess I'll get to that. Like when my queue allows it, I'll get to it. Whereas like in startup land, like, oh, okay, this is a problem. All right, I'll fix it today.
Yeah.
Right. And if it's not worth fixing today or this week or this month, in startup land, it's really not worth fixing at all. So, like, it's just not. It's just forget about it, drop it. If it's important, I'll come back again later. But a lot of the time, it's that kind of sense of urgency of solve it now or don't solve it at all.
So, are you a big believer in like lean startup methodology?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So like time to learn, like how fast you can iterate on your learning, for example, that's a really important aspect.
And then there's always that quote which I use all the time, which is if you're not embarrassed about your product when you launch it, you launched too late.
I use that quote all the time, so it's a great quote. Generally, it's someone who's embarrassed about their product.
Yeah, well, I genuinely believe if you're not embarrassed about your product, you don't actually, you don't like your product enough.
Yeah. A few of the products that actually some of my companies might be shipping today are actually quite terrible.
Yeah, most.
It's right, but people still like them. So.
Yeah. Or need them. Sometimes there's a difference.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a better way of putting it. They need them, they don't like them. Yeah. The liking will come later.
All right, sorry.
And the last point. The last point is it's in spite of the urgency, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So enjoy the journey.
Interesting. I think most successful startups take at least 5 years, right?
Yeah, just before I came here, I was looking at a chart. I think it was Roblox.
The game.
Yeah, and so they, I think it was 30 billion they just got valued at.
Whoa.
And it wasn't that long ago where they were valued at 14 million, not billion, million.
Yeah.
So they went like 14 million, 40 million, like 80 million, something like that. And then basically the valuation curve took a long time at a very flat kind of perspective before it actually kind of like skyrocketed.
It's a real hockey stick.
Yeah, it's a real hockey stick. That's right. But that is not uncommon in successful companies.
Yeah.
So
well, the whatever it is, 5 to 10 years. So if you start a startup thinking that you're going to sell it in 3 years, you're crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Assume you're going to be there for 10 years, if not life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I like it's a life.
Yeah, I was going to say
like a sentence.
It's like 40th year in my startup. I'm getting there.
Any day now.
Actually, that's a good question about exit strategies. So I think a lot of startups, when you speak to investors, they always ask, "What's the exit strategy? Is it to get acquired by another company?" But now you're talking about 5 to 10 years. So when you speak to startups, do you actually look for an exit strategy that has a longer time period than 3-year exits?
I mean, look, a 3-year exit that if it was actually reasonable would be okay. And depending on the stage of investor, if you're a late stage investor, it could very well be less than 3 years.
True.
When you're coming in,
it's a timing thing.
Probably what I more look for is that they actually have an exit strategy.
What if their exit strategy is to never exit?
Then they're a poor choice for an investor. Because there's no way the investor gets their money back unless the company will somehow pay dividends.
What about the like going public but staying in?
Yeah, that's fine. And that's an exit strategy.
That's
right?
something, yeah.
Yeah, that's something. So, I mean, the main thing is, they have to have some kind of realistic exit strategy and that they're actually willing to exit.
Yeah.
If their exit strategy is we're going to get bought by someone and that's their only exit strategy, typically not a great choice.
What if they've already targeted we're going to get bought by Microsoft, here's the reasons why.
And what if Microsoft don't buy you? What do you do now?
Yeah.
So they better have an answer.
Yeah. So do you often speak to startups that don't have an answer? So yeah, what's your exit strategy? They're like, oh, haven't thought of that.
Well, it depends on the stage. Like if they're like pre-seed, then sure. They're like, yeah, but currently it's me and a dog. It's the entire company. In some cases, the dog is a contractor.
For tax reasons.
Get some job keeper.
Exactly. Yes. And look, honestly, like them having an exit strategy at that point is probably unrealistic.
Yeah.
But they should at least be able to say, yes, I do intend to exit at some point.
But ultimately, they should. You'd expect the startup community to have the education and knowledge to prepare that kind of stuff before speaking to investors.
That is lacking in WA.
I was about to. Yeah, that's my next point.
Yes,
is that it's education on deals and deal flow and how to move all that kind of information. Is it missing, and how do we fix that?
Look, there's a number of people who are trying to solve that. Who do education. I've done kind of some training sessions myself for a few people to try and help educate them. But it's a bit hit and miss because it's not really a really kind of solid baked in ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it's very patchy as to whether you've actually heard something or not. It doesn't feel like it's kind of air that you're just surrounded by it and you kind of just pick it up by osmosis. Because if you're a busy startup founder, you don't have time to go all these education sessions all the time.
And when you talk about always learning, that's the least interesting thing to learn about. There's like leadership and technology and but VC deal flow.
There's so many other things to learn about, and you never hear about it. So clearly, it's not important.
I guess a lot of the VCs actually kind of like that. They're the educated ones on this, right?
I think so, but
gives you an advantage as well, right?
Well, my view is that look, VC it's a long game. It's a patient game. It has to be a patient game, and you really only make money if the company's actually worth something. Yeah. And so the founders actually need to know what they're doing, and so understanding economics and understanding what they need to do is a part of that story. So,
how much equity? how much equity can an early stage, let's say after seed, how much equity can an early stage founder kind of expect to keep when they bring VC in?
Well, I've seen that vary wildly.
Yeah.
So I've seen anything from Atlassian where I think our first raise was 60 million.
Wow.
And we're already pretty profitable. In fact, I think we had more than 60 million in the bank.
Wow.
Anyway, I don't remember the details of the numbers, but it was kind of crazy. So, obviously the terms there were pretty good, on that particular deal. And I've seen other ones where the founders are diluted to like a couple of percent.
Wow.
So it varies a lot because honestly, on that journey, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, of course. All right, so I've got a couple questions for you to end the interview. Number one, any book recommendations? I think it's something I want to ask every guest we have, but I understand if none come to mind because you're in front of a mic.
0 to 1, Lean Startup.
0 to 1, yeah.
Blitzscaling.
Yep. Cool. I know the other ones. I don't know that one.
That's a good one. Yeah, it's a good book.
And what does the future look like for Glenn Butcher, 2021?
I actually don't know.
Cool.
It's a good feeling, I think.
Yeah. And I'm okay with that.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great answer. And we always end every episode with a whimsical question, and it's always the same whimsical question. I don't know if you're a big fan of wrestling or MMA. But the fighters, they come out and they have their intro music, right? So the lights go down, the fog machines start up, and the song plays that, like personifies their character and sets the scene. What is your intro music?
Don't Pay the Ferryman.
Don't Pay the Ferryman? Nice. Good choice. I like how quickly you answered it too.
That's great.
Yeah.
You knew the answer straight away.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. That was a fantastic interview, and I'm glad you've made it back to Perth.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad to be home.
You've made it to the end of another episode of Tech Society. Well, that was a great episode. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed making it. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter @Tech Society, head over to the website, subscribe to the newsletter. And on this month in tech history, May 22, 1980, Namco's upcoming game, Pac-Man, is location tested in a movie theater complex in Japan. After favourable initial testing, the game slightly tweaked, with the most major change, it being renamed to Pac-Man. The creators of the game consider May 22 to be Pac-Man's birthday, because it was the first time the game was shown to the general public.